Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om peace, peace, peace. And good evening. We are continuing with the parables of Sri Ramakrishna. And we're going to start the third section. And this one's on Brahman. So it'll have several parables on the nature of Brahman. I'm going to start with the salt doll.
The salt doll went to fathom the ocean. Once the salt doll went to measure the depth of the ocean. It wanted to tell others how deep the water was. This it could never do, for no sooner did it get into the water than it melted. Now who was there to report the ocean's depth? What Brahman is cannot be described. In Samadhi, one attains the knowledge of Brahman, one realizes Brahman. In that state, reasoning stops altogether, and man becomes mute. He has no power to describe the nature of Brahman.
Right. If you've read the Gospel of Ramakrishna, you'll remember that many times Sri Ramakrishna would say that when he comes down from the state of samadhi, he tries to communicate what it's like, but the way he sometimes would put it is the Divine Mother holds his tongue and he can't describe it. And this, of course, is the difficulty with all of the systems of philosophy and the different religious traditions, is that the saints and sages try to describe the experience of God and how to get there, but it's not that easy. In fact, it's like this parable says, it's impossible, because once you've had the highest experience, there is no you left. And so there's no you left to describe it, because the subject and object have merged back into the one. As we've often said, the initial facet of Maya is that it's the oneness splits into the subject and the object in the process of knowing, or the knower and the known and the process of knowing. And so this is the ground of Maya, you could say, or the ground of the manifested universe. And the myths sometimes will say Brahman wanted to know itself, and so it split into the many, and so then it knows itself. And so, but then it doesn't know itself in its true nature. It knows itself in the multiplicity, but it doesn't know itself in the true nature of oneness. All right, let's read some more about Brahman, and eventually we're going to read about how you can't say anything about Brahman, but we're going to read several parables about it anyway. And of course, this is the way that Sri Ramakrishna would often try to get across difficult concepts, is to tell parables. All right. 4 friends looked beyond.
Once 4 friends, in the course of a walk, saw a place enclosed by a wall, and the wall was very high. They all became eager to know what was inside. One of them climbed to the top of the wall. What he saw on looking inside made him speechless with wonder, and he cried, dropped in. He could not give any information about what he saw. The others too climbed the wall. They uttered the same cry, aha, aha, and they jumped in. Now, who could tell what was inside? What Brahman is cannot be described. Even he who knows it cannot talk about it.
You know, there are a couple of other versions, at least one other version of this, where the first two or three people climb up and look over and begin to laugh with joy. And so they jump over. And the last one realizes that these other people are not going to be able to let others know how wonderful this is. And so he decides to go back. And so that's like the avatar, the incarnations of God that come back to inform us as best they can, and since words are never really adequate, but they try the best they can to describe the nature of the reality and our true nature and how to realize it. This is a slightly different version here. All right, let's talk about where silence is eloquent and speech doth falter. So you see this? I could just come and just sit here quietly if I followed this parable. All right, let's try this one.
A man had 2 sons. The father sent them to a preceptor to learn the knowledge of Brahman. After a few years, they returned from the preceptor's house. They bowed low before their father. Wanting to measure the depth of their knowledge of Brahman, the father first questioned the older of the 2 boys. "My child," he said, "now you've studied all the scriptures. Now tell me, what is the nature of Brahman?" The boy began to explain Brahman by reciting various texts from the Vedas. The father did not say anything. Then he asked the younger boy the same question, but he remained silent and stood with eyes cast down. No word escaped his lips, and the father was pleased and said to him, "My child, you have understood a little of Brahman. What it is cannot be expressed in words."
One speaker in India once was asked to speak on Brahman, and he got up and said nothing and sat down, back down again. I remember also many years ago there was a Swami named Swami Bhutananda, and he gave a talk on silence. And normally our talks are about 55 minutes long. After about 35 minutes, he ran out of things to say and said, "Let's just experience silence." So we sat in silence for the rest of the hour. All right, let's look at the neither yes nor no parable.
The husband of a young girl has come to his father-in-law's house and is seated in the drawing room with other young men of his age. The girl and her friends are looking at them through the window. Her friends do not know her husband. They ask her, pointing to one young man, "Is that your husband?" "No," she answers, smiling. They point to another man, ask if he is her husband. Again, she answers, "No." They repeat the question. Referring to a third, she gives the same answer. Last, they point to her husband and ask, "Is he the one?" She says neither yes nor no, but only smiles, keeps quiet, and her friends realize that he is her husband. One becomes silent on realizing the true nature of Brahman.
So very much the same idea here. Once one knows the truth, one doesn't have the words to express it. But of course, in this one, she easily could have said yes or no. But frequently, sometimes people like to be coy, and so they're using this common type of incident to illustrate this more philosophical point. All right, the king and the magician.
As you go nearer to God, you see less and less of his upadhis, his attributes. The devotee at first may see the deity as the 10-armed Divine Mother. When he goes near her, he sees her possessed of 6 arms. And still nearer, he sees the deity as the 2-armed Gopala. The nearer he comes to the deity, the fewer attributes he sees. And at last, when he comes into the presence of the deity, he sees only light without any attribute. Listen a little to the Vedantic reasoning. A magician came to a king to show his magic. When the magician moved away a little, the king saw a rider on horseback approaching him. He was brilliantly arrayed and had various weapons in his hands. The king and the audience began to reason out what was real in the phenomenon before them. Evidently, the horse was not real, nor the robes, nor the armors. At last they found out, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that the rider alone was really there. The significance is this, that Brahman alone is real, the world, unreal. Nothing whatsoever remains if you analyze.
This is often used as an example of sort of the magic show being the nature of Maya and the nature of the world, so that the world that we see is the world of Maya, and it's like a magic show. The way we're interpreting what we're seeing is not correct, and that's the nature of a magician. He wants you to think one thing is happening when it's not. So he might, for example, make it look like he's cutting somebody in half, and then he has the magical power to put them back together again. But he never cut them in the first place. So this again is very apt to the nature of Maya. Maya makes us see the oneness as many, all cut up. And we struggle hard in our spiritual practices to put it all back together into the oneness. And then we find out that it was never really divided into many in the first place. Now, of course, there's another interpretation of this that this is kind of the extreme Shankara type of Advaita here, where we're saying that the world is unreal. But Ramakrishna often didn't take that quite extreme stance, because he would say that everything is the embodiment of consciousness. And so when you look at it that way, the world is not unreal. It's a manifestation of consciousness. But we're still not seeing it right. We don't see it as being a manifestation of consciousness. So in that sense, the way we see it is not real. But the nature of the world actually is real. It's nothing but consciousness. All right, let's talk about when face to face.
Where the mind attains peace by practicing the discipline of neti, there Brahman is. The king dwells in the inmost room of the palace, which has 7 gates. The visitor comes to the first gate. Then he sees a royal person with a large retinue surrounded on all sides by pomp and grandeur. The visitor asks his companion, "Is he the king?" "Oh no," says his friend with a smile. The second and other gates, he repeats the same question to his friend. He finds that the nearer he comes to the inmost part of the palace, the greater is the glory, pomp, and grandeur. But when he passes the seventh gate, he does not ask his companion whether it is the king, because he stands speechless at the king's immeasurable glory. He realizes that now he is face to face with the king. He hasn't the slightest doubt about it.
Now, the seven gates might have the symbolism of the seven chakras, or it might have the symbolism of seven heavens. Not quite sure what the original intention of the parable was. But anyway, there are levels of these realizations. Even the heavens have different levels, and only in the highest level it has all the distinction between the knower and the known, or between the spiritual aspirant and the Ishtadevata, the chosen ideal. That's where the distinction vanishes at that level. So that they've probably used that as a symbolism there about these seven gates. Otherwise, they could have used any number of gates, right? It could have been 4 or 12 or whoever. All right, let's read the parable on Behold, O King, behold.
Once a king asked a yogi to impart knowledge to him in one word. The yogi said, "All right, you will get knowledge in one word." After a while, a magician came to the king. The king saw the magician moving 2 of his fingers rapidly and heard him explain, "Behold, O king, behold." The king looked at him amazed when after a few minutes he saw the 2 fingers becoming one. And the magician moved that one finger rapidly and said, "Behold, O king, behold." The implication of the story is that Brahman, the primal energy, at first appear to be 2. But after attaining knowledge of Brahman, one does not see the 2. Then there is no differentiation. It is one without a second, Advaita, non-duality.
And the examples that Ramakrishna used to give is that you can't separate sugar from its sweetness or milk from its whiteness. Another example is you can't separate the waves in the ocean from the ocean. There's still just all water, or that all the ornaments that are made out of gold are all still gold. So these are all examples of the oneness always being there in spite of the appearance of many. All right. Time for dinner. An ant went to a sugar hill. We've had salt at the beginning, now we're going to sugar.
Men often think they have understood Brahman fully. Once an ant went to a sugar hill. One grain filled its stomach. Taking another grain in its mouth, it started homeward. On its way, it thought, "Well, next time, I shall carry home the whole hill." That's the way shallow minds think. They don't know that Brahman is beyond words and thought. However great a man may be, how much can he know of Brahman? Sukadeva and sages like him may have been big ants, but even they, at the utmost, could carry 8 or 10 grains of sugar.
So Yeah, Brahman is the infinite, undivided, and unchanging reality. And we're lucky to get a glimpse of Brahman. But once one realizes Brahman, then they're one with the whole thing, and there's no talk about having to take anything, because you already are that. All right, he eats, yet eats not.
Once Vyasadeva was about to cross the Jamuna. The gopis also were there. They wanted to go to the other side of the river to sell curd, milk, and cream. There was no ferry at that time. They were all worried about how to cross the river. And Vyasa said to them, "I'm very hungry." The milkmaids fed him with milk and cream. He finished almost all their food. Then Vyasa said to the river, "O Jamuna, if I have not eaten anything, then your waters will part, and we shall walk through." And it so happened. The river parted, and a pathway was formed between the waters. Following that path, the gopis and Vyasa crossed the river. Now, Vyasa had said, if I had not eaten anything, that means the real man is pure, Atman. Atman is unattached and beyond Prakriti. There's neither hunger nor thirst. It knows neither birth nor death. It does not age, nor does it die. It is immutable as Mount Sumeru.
There you go. Yeah, so you see, he was an enlightened sage and was not identified with his little body and mind. This is not recommended behavior for the rest of us. Then you're like the man who had killed the cow in the garden, and when someone came to observe the garden, he took credit for all the good things, and he didn't take any credit for killing the cow because he said some deity had done it. So you see that kind of reasoning doesn't work. So as long as we're not enlightened, we can't say things like this. We can't say that we have not done this or we have not done that. We still are identified with our lower self, so we have to say things truthfully. But Vyasadeva was not identified with his lower self, and so he could say this. All right. Next one is all pure spirit.
All doubts disappear when one sees God. It is one thing to hear of God, but quite a different thing to see him. A man cannot have 100% conviction through mere hearing, but if he beholds God face to face, then he is wholly convinced. Formal worship drops away after the vision of God. It was thus that my worship in the temple came to an end. I used to worship the deity in the Kali temple, but it was suddenly revealed to me that everything is pure spirit. The utensils of worship, the altar, the door frame, they were all pure spirit. Then, like a madman, I began to shower flowers in all directions. And whatever I saw, I worshipped.
So that's not exactly a parable. It's simply a telling of an incident of Sri Ramakrishna's life and how he experienced everything as pure spirit, or another way to say that he experienced consciousness in everything, as we mentioned before in context with the other parable. So again, there is a big difference between hearing about Brahman and hearing about God, having an intellectual understanding to a certain extent, and actually experiencing it. And once one experiences it, they see the world differently. And that even though they may not stay in that state all the time, the effect of having been in that state stays with them even afterwards. As we heard, if you were lucky enough to hear the reading about the Kalpataru Day, that when Sri Ramakrishna blessed many of his disciples with spiritual visions, they often would recount that that experience stayed with them, even though they weren't in that ecstatic state for very long. They couldn't handle all their daily activities. They couldn't handle their worldly responsibilities. They had family duties, and they couldn't stay in that state. But the effect of that, having been in that state, stayed with them. All right, now, we played you the musical version of the chameleon parable, so we might skip that one and go on to the man with a tub of dye.
Naturally, doubt arises in the mind if God is formless. How then can he have form? Further, if he has a form, why does he have so many forms? These things do not become clear until one has realized God. He assumes different forms and reveals himself in different ways for the sake of his devotees. A man kept a solution of dye in a tub. Many people came to him to have their clothes dyed. He would ask a customer, "Well, what color should you like to have your cloth dyed?" The customer wanted red, and the man would dip the cloth in the tub and say, "Now here's your cloth dyed red." If another customer wanted his cloth dyed yellow, the man would dip his cloth in the same tub and say, "Here's your cloth dyed yellow." If the customer wanted his cloth dyed blue, the man still would dip it in the same tub and say, "Now here's your cloth dyed blue." Then he would dye the clothes of his customers different colors, but he was dipping them all in the same solution. Now, one of the customers watched all this with amazement. The man asked him, "Well, what color do you want for your cloth?" The customer said, "Well, brother, dye my cloth the color of the dye in your tub."
All right, so of course, maybe we should have read the one about the chameleon, but I'll just paraphrase it quickly. People saw the chameleon at different times, and he appeared as different colors. And so, not knowing that the chameleon could change colors, they argued about it. Only the person who lived under the tree where the chameleon lived saw it with all the different colors. And so similarly, this is a parable that illustrates that the true nature of God is no one thing. God is able to manifest in all sorts of ways. So devotees of Krishna will experience God as Krishna. Devotees of Jesus will experience God as Jesus, or perhaps the Virgin Mary. And worshipers of the Divine Mother will see some form of the Divine Mother. Could be all sorts of forms of the Divine Mother. As it said in that last one, she could have 10 arms or 8 arms, or depending on how many aspects of the Divine Mother are manifesting in that particular vision. So depending on what deity you're particularly attracted to, you might experience God with a particular form. But eventually, your chosen ideal will lead you to the realization of the one Brahman who is colorless, formless, with no attributes. And so essentially, the color of the dye in this vat would be the ultimate Brahman, which it does not have a color. But whatever your desire is, if you desire to see God in a particular form, God will come to you in that form. Unless you you need to experience the fact that your form of God is not the only form of God. And we've had parables about that too, where there was someone who was particularly bigoted about seeing God in a particular form, and so God came to him as a form that had both forms in one. And the devotee was finally forced to realize that both aspects were really part of the one. All right, let's look at what the Divine Mother revealed to me. Sounds like another personal incident of Sri Ramakrishna.
Do you know where those who speak of the formless God make their mistake? It's where they say that God is formless only, and that those who differ from them are wrong. But I know God is both with and without form, and he may have many more aspects. It's possible for him to be everything. The Chichakti Mamaya has become the 24 cosmic principles. One day, as I was meditating, my mind wandered away to Rashki's house. He's a scavenger. I said to my mind, "Stay there, you rogue." The Divine Mother revealed to me that the men and women in the house were mere masks, and inside them was the same divine power, the Kundalini, that rises up to the 6 spiritual centers of the body.
If we look at our modern day physics, we can get an idea of this as well, because Einstein's famous equation E equals mc squared showed that matter was simply energy seen in a different form. And so just as God can be formless, like energy, most energy we don't think of as having a form, but it can physically manifest in various forms. In fact, matter is energy manifest in a physical form. And if you analyze it very, very closely, you find that the physical form really doesn't have much of a substance to it. It's made up of electrons and protons, and the electrons are nothing but the infinite seen as small, and the protons are nothing but the undivided seen as divided. And there isn't the atoms, even in the most materialistic viewpoint, are mostly empty space. And the electron is not a particle that's got a particular path. We only observe it to have a particular place, and the more we know about where it is, the less we know about where it's going. So the whole world is a very mysterious kind of magic show of energy. And so that if we can realize that the whole universe is just a play of energy, that energy is formless. But it can manifest in all these different forms. All these different atoms are really just forms of energy that we're perceiving. It's our perception of the energy that looks like it's got some sort of form to it. Just like the vat of dye, we put a preconceived idea about how it's going to look, and so it comes out that way. So that's really the mysterious nature of the universe. All right, we're whipping right through all these, aren't we? How a monk knew the truth about God.
A certain monk went to the temple of Jagannath at Puri. He had doubts as to whether God is with form or without form. When he saw the holy image, he desired to examine it and settle his doubt. He passed his staff from the left to the right in order to feel if it touched the image. For a time he could not see anything or feel anything with the staff. So he decided that God was without form. But when he was about to pass the staff from the right to the left, it touched the image. So the monk decided that God is both with form and without form.
So again, of course, this is a metaphorical happening here. But the idea is if God seen from one perspective is formless, from the other perspective, it's with form. And so when the staff is going from one side, from the left to the right, you're seeing it from one perspective, and from right to left, you're seeing it in another perspective. And so God is both with form and without form, just as we talked about in the previous one. Really, this was, this is still a debate among many people. Even in Christianity, you have, of course, in the Catholic Church, it's very common to have the crucifix with an actual human image of Christ on the crucifix. Protestants didn't like that idea. They didn't want to see Christ on the crucifix. They didn't want to have forms to be worshipped. And so you don't see that in Protestant churches. You don't see, except for the Episcopalians, you don't see pictures of saints and sages in stained glass windows. The idea is more of an abstract feeling about God. Of course, Islam also has injunctions against picturing God with form. They don't even want the prophet to be pictured in some sort of form. So these are debates that still go on between different sects of different religious traditions. And Sri Ramakrishna's greatness is that he reconciled all these and said it's fine to think of God with form, it's fine to see God without form, but of course he's recommending that you realize that others are okay doing it the way you're not doing it. So that was his great contribution. I'm not sure everyone listens to that yet, but anyway, hopefully someday people will relax and let people worship God the way they'd like to worship him. God alone has become all things. So you see, again, this is going to speak to this idea of dualism. Are we going to have a dualistic philosophy where God is the potter and he makes the world out of clay? So you have two substances. You've got the spirit or the creator, and you've got matter, which is separate. Or are you going to realize that God creates the universe out of himself, just as Sri Ramakrishna would use the parable of the spider spinning the web out of itself, or a sheep spinning wool out of itself. All right, let's read this one. God alone has become all things.
At one time, Rama was overpowered by the spirit of renunciation. Dasarata worried at this, and he went to the sage Vashishta and begged him to persuade Rama not to give up the world. The sage came to Rama, found him in a gloomy mood. The fire of intense renunciation had been raging in the prince's mind. So Vashishta said, Rama, why should you renounce the world? Is the world outside God? Reason with me. And Rama realized that the world had evolved from the Supreme Brahman. So he said nothing.
Now, of course, the philosophical systems that are dualistic are perfectly valid from that particular standpoint. So if you're seeing a physical universe and you want to realize what's beyond it, as Sri Ramakrishna again used the example of saying not this, as you walk up the steps from the ground up to the roof. And then when you get to the roof, you realize the roof is made up of the same stuff of all the steps and all the lower floors. And so this is saying that these to see things in a dualistic fashion is not incorrect. From that standpoint, you want to first experience, disregard the less real nature of the manifestation, because the manifestation is a temporary manifestation. But once you get to that height of realization, you'll realize that everything is Brahman. And so that this process of neti leads to a process of iti. Instead of not this, it's this. Everything is Brahman. But you see, this manifest universe tends to be very distracting. And it's a world that we get through our senses. And our senses give a warped interpretation of the universe. In fact, even from a very physical standpoint, we can see through the process of optical illusions, or we can analyze that what we're getting through our sense organs are not always reliable. Not just optical illusions, you can have auditory illusions as well, and physical illusions. You can make people feel like their hand is being stroked with a feather when it's not being stroked by a feather, and all sorts of different illusions. So our sense organs are not terribly reliable. And so this is why it's frequently recommended that we go through this process of not this. But ultimately, we find out that the world is nothing but Brahman. And again, that physical example we gave with the electrons and the protons in the physical universe, and it looks like it's made up of matter, and matter is made up of electrons and protons. But then we realize electrons and protons are just made up of energy. And so the whole universe is just made out of energy. So similarly, we might at some stage think of the world as not being Brahman, but ultimately we will see that the world is nothing but Brahman. That's a very high state, of course. All right, I think we have time for just one more parable, and then we'll call it an evening.
Strip name and form and look beyond. Once a sadhu placed his disciple in a magnificent garden with the intention of imparting to him the knowledge of the real self. Then he went away. After a few days, he came back and asked the disciple, "Do you feel any want, my boy?" And being answered in the affirmative, he left with him a fair woman named Shama, and advised him to take fish and meat freely. After considerable time, he came again, asked the same question as before. This time the disciple replied, "No, I've no want, thank you." The sadhu then called both the disciple and Shama to him, and pointing to Shama's hands, asked the disciple, "Can you tell me what these are?" "Well, these are Shama's hands," replied the disciple. He put the same question several times, pointing to Shama's eyes, nose, and other parts of the body. The disciple gave appropriate answers. Presently, the idea struck the disciple. I am talking of everything as Shama's this And Shama's that. What then is this Shama? And bewildered, he asked his guru the question. But who is this Shama to whom belong these eyes, ears, and the rest? And the sadhu said, if you wish to know who the Shama is, come with me and I will enlighten you. And so saying, he revealed to him the secret.
So again, the universe is all this varied forms, and what's behind it is the oneness of Brahman. And so, but it's said that Brahman sees through all the eyes and hears through all the ears and feels through all the hands and moves through all the feet. This is a common expression that you find in the Upanishads and the Gita and so forth, that Brahman is basically permeating everything, and so it's the power that is seeing through all these sense organs. So rather than being distracted by the particulars and what your particular sense organs are experiencing, you want to know what it is that's the experiencer. Who's the experiencer of all of this that sees all these different parts out there? And of course the answer is the Atman, who is one with Brahman. All right, that concludes the parables for tonight. We'll continue next week. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace.